Welcome to Learn to Live Stress-Free. This is Christine Wright with Dr. Robert Wright, Jr., your go-to wellness coaches of www.stressfreenow.info. Our featured guest today is Alan Eisenberg, speaking on bullying, how to heal the hurt. Alan is the creator of the very successful blog, bullyinglte.wordpress.com, where he has told his own personal story of being bullied and where he has allowed others to share their own bullying stories. He also recently started a company called Bullying Recovery, LLC, and will be publishing his autobiography this summer titled A Ladder in the Dark, My Journey from Bullying to Self-Acceptance. Alan was born in 1968 and grew up in Maryland, Massachusetts, and Virginia. He has had a successful career as a visual communications expert, e-learning web and video producer, programmer, and writer. During his younger years from 6 to 14, he was bullied pretty intensely, particularly while growing up in Lexington, Massachusetts. While that ended long ago, Alan discovered that the long-term effects of those important years do not leave us but stay with us. He has conducted extensive research on bullying and has found that he is not alone and that the painful long-term effects of bullying into adulthood are common issues now called complex PTSD. Alan's dream is to one day help others on a full-time basis with solutions to bullying, including implementation of stricter laws and support systems in our school and workplaces. Alan, welcome.
Thank you, Christine and Bob. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you on the show.
Hi, Alan. Thank you for being our featured guest today, and I want to thank our audience for listening in. Alan, can you tell our audience what led you to do the work that you're currently doing?
It's really an interesting story. It really started back on 9/11 when we had terrorists fly into the two Twin Towers, and that sounds interesting that has any connection for me, but the hate and the vitriol that came out of that just really hit me. I was actually only about 2 miles from the Pentagon, and my building shook, and I have family that works in the government, and it was a very scary day, and it really spun me into, sort of that stress and anxiety area that would start to ruminate in my mind. After that, there was the Columbine incident, and there was talk of bullying, although never, in the end, it was proven that it wasn't bullying, that the two shooters did it for other reasons. But it did come out that there was a lot of bullying happening at that school. And finally, for me, my alma mater is Virginia Tech. And when the Virginia Tech shooting happened in 2008, it did come out that particular person had been bullied, and it was the realization for me started to come out of what happened to me. So I really started to believe that there is no stopping of bullying. Bullying is going to happen, and while I have great respect for the people who try to create anti-bullying programs that reduce the amount of bullying, what we're not focused on is the recovery effects or the recovering of both the bullying survivor and the bully, because it's really on both sides that there's issues. And it was really important to me that kind of message get out, that we need to tell our stories. We need to understand we're not alone, because there's a lot of loneliness in the bullying issue. And so I really wanted to start by telling my stories and saying, I'm an adult, but these are still stories I carry with me every day. At the time, I didn't realize how much they had damaged me or hurt me in my life. But as I recalled them, I found I had a lot of pain. I had a lot of stress and anguish and anxiety over that. But I wanted people to know that they're not alone. So I shared my stories, and I would constantly, at the time, tell my family, I do these things because I was bullied. It was my excuse for my own actions or inactions. And that was sort of the realization for me that there was something wrong with me. And when I say something wrong, I don't mean it in the negative, that, I developed habits or ways I lived that I didn't like about me, and that adults weren't talking about bullying that happened to them. So kids were committing suicide, or what we call bullycide, at a level that's way too high. My goal is really to have adults start to have that conversation, that honest conversation that says, you're not alone. In fact, you're not alone because it's happened to me. It's happened to almost everybody. The percentage is near 80% of kids are bullied. So we all know that we at one time or another had that happen to us.
Thank you, Alan. As I listen to you, I think part of what happens in our culture is we forget that we're feeling beings and that our emotions matter. And sometimes we ignore that very obvious thing. Now, before we started the call, you mentioned that you were ahead of, if you will, this trend, that bullying as a topic in the news media has been recent, but this, because of your experiences, we've learned in our conversations with you, you were ahead of this trend. Can you define for us what bullying is and why the topic is now trending so much? I think you touched on it a bit, with the incidents in the school, but could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I like to use the website stopbullying.gov. I was very proud to see the U.S. government take a stand about bullying, and of course this happened several years after I got involved with my site, but I'm glad they did because it created a definition. So I always take their definition because I think they did a good job of saying what bullying is and what it isn't. I always explain to people that, I was in a fraternity. Luckily, I was never hazed, but we read about hazing in sports. That's not bullying. If everybody's experiencing it at the same time, it's not bullying. So, stopbullying.gov, I'll just tell you the definition, is bullying is an unwanted aggressive behavior among school-aged children that involves a real or perceived power imbalance. The behavior is a repeated behavior, not just one time, or has to be the potential to be repeated over time. Both kids who are bullied and who bully others may have serious, lasting problems, which is amazing that they said that on their site. I do want to add that bullying is not just a kid problem. There's a lot of workplace bullying and adult bullying that goes on. So that's the only place I differ with the definition that they have, is to say it doesn't just end with kids, because then you get back into the argument that it's kids being kids, and that's not true. So anyway, stopbullying.gov goes on to say, in order to be considered bullying, the behavior must be aggressive and include an imbalance of power. So people who use bullying use their power, such as physical strength, say they're bigger, access to embarrassing information about the bullying victim or survivor, as I like to say, or their popularity. So obviously there's always a popularity thing. And that crosses into workplace as well. It can be less physical strength, but it could be position strength, like they oversee you and they're your boss and you can't do anything or you'll be fired. So they use these things to control or harm others. So power imbalance can really change over time and in different situations. So even I have stories about where in a different situation I was a bully, and I'm not ashamed of that. It just, it makes kind of sense. If you're bullied and you're bullied a lot, you want revenge, and if you had an opportunity for that revenge, sometimes you take it. And so I do have a story about my own thing. So nothing is black and white. Everything is gray in the bullying world, and I think that's a mistake we make also, is to assume that there's only survivors and bullies and that there's no mix. Well, a lot of the times the bullies are being abused at home or abused in a different way, and so they're also survivors. So the other thing that the definition says is it must be repetition, that bullying behavior has to happen more than once. So somebody comes up to you and says, I don't like you, and pushes you, is not going to be bullying. And this is, again, where we make a mistake of just throwing blame immediately instead of things have to happen more than once. And, the actions can include things like making threats, spreading rumors, attacking someone physically or verbally or mentally, and excluding someone from a group on purpose. And certainly in today's society of of the internet and all the different places that someone can be cyberbullied, that's become one of the big things, the exclusion, yet they're also being told they're excluded. They're also reading about how people feel about them. It's a very dangerous situation we're in right now with cyberbullying. And the biggest difference is that it's an excluded behavior, where you're taken out of the group. So again, it's why I truly believe bullying can't be stopped, because the idea of it is to catch you in a point where you're outside of anyone else. And we can all agree, you have to go to the bathroom at school and you're the only one in the bathroom and the bully knows and comes in and attacks you. It's common. Or I was a walker going home, so they knew I walked this path, and so they would go and catch me on the path away from the school and bully me. And it was excluded behavior. So I really think that, in today's world, what we have is the internet has made bullying explode to the forefront. So why did it take on what it's taken on? It's because the bullies actually started videotaping their actions and putting it on YouTube, or writing blog entries about their actions, and all of a sudden we saw it. All of a sudden it was real and right in front of us. And I think when that happens, society reacts like they don't want to believe it, but now they have no choice to believe it. And the bully, I don't know why they would do it, but they would get a thrill from doing these posts, and they still do. To this day, they know other people have gotten in trouble, but there's so much bullying posting going on that every day I can go to the internet and find something. Every day.
As I listen to you, I just really want to thank you for your blog and the work that you're doing, because for the person being bullied to have an advocate and a voice and a place to realize that they're not alone is a true gift. It's an oasis in the desert. So certainly what you do brings value. Alan, can you describe for our audience the types of stress and anxiety an individual being bullied experiences, and how that stress affects their behavior and thinking, including all the projected scenarios or bad outcomes potential victims may be running through their mind? Because it is the physical fear of being bullied, but it's a psychological warfare going on also.
Yeah, I had developed a term when I first started that I was experiencing that was called perceived threat syndrome. Is that basically the damage that's done is highly involved in your fight or flight way of thinking, and that is a passed down from when we used to hunting, and you would make a choice. So your body has so many reactions when you're put into panic. And as you know, as a stress and anxiety expert, that really stress and anxiety go hand in hand with depression. And so what we really see is that people end up depressed. And even though I thank you for your words about how much I do, what I do know, and I know this unfortunately from personal experience, is that when someone falls into anxiety and depression, their mind no longer tells them that there's anyone there to help them, and it's a real struggle for them to find help. I only hope that they find my website, but there's still a lot of places that even when I was in my place will tell all the bad stories and never share that there's help out there, and that's still a problem that we need to resolve. But I can tell you, having dealt myself with stress and anxiety from bullying, but there are so many major issues for people who have suffered from bullying and as a bully. Basically, their self-esteem is completely damaged in many cases, and they believe they can't do anything right. So no matter what they do in life, they truly feel never satiated by what they're doing. And in fact, I was just talking to my mother about this, because everybody has a story and everybody has some self-esteem that they have to repair at some point in their life, whether it's caused from as a child or as an adult. But the other thing that bully survivors do, and bullies probably do as well, is they're constantly worried about what others think about. So the bully survivor is constantly worried about what others are thinking about them. So they get, their self-esteem becomes so damaged that they get into this situation where they're always worried. They're always trying to mind read everybody and they believe people see them badly. So for some, just leaving the house causes such anxiety that because they're afraid of everyone, so they don't even actually leave their house ever, which we know can happen with anxiety. And in 2013, the issue was finally defined. This issue that we have was finally defined by the American Psychiatric Association as complex post-traumatic stress disorder, or CPTSD. I know when we were talking beforehand, you said there's very few therapists and even psychiatrists that have heard this term before, but it was defined in 2013, and as time goes on, I think it will be better defined. And C-PTSD, or complex PTSD, is really all about things that happen. It has to be an effect from a childhood of abuse of some sort or a childhood trauma. So, mind you, this was coined 6 years after I started working on my blog that's called The Long-Term Effects of Bullying. So, I don't know why I knew it. I just knew I felt damaged. And so the research is only in its infancy, and things are just getting started. CPTSD, by definition, is a psychological injury that results from protracted exposure to prolonged social and or interpersonal trauma in the context of dependence. So, again, I'm speaking from what the American Psychiatric Association says it is. It's the context of dependence, captivity, or entrapment. And as I mentioned before, it's that idea that bullies catch you when you're alone. So you're trapped. You're held captive by the bully. And it's got to be a situation lacking a visible escape route for the victim. So again, that idea that you're cornered, that you're going to be feeling trapped, feeling this way, and then the result of that is the lack or loss of control, helplessness, and deformations of identity and sense of self. So just like I'm talking about, everything that's mentioned there is exactly what I was going through, and I knew others were going through it, even though I didn't have any quantifiable data at the time, because it's only just started to be looked at very deeply as it's caught on in society that it's a problem.
Right, I can see that. So often we dismiss the experiences of children and their feeling, they're young, they won't remember. It doesn't mean, it's not that big a deal. And it is to the child, and there is no place to express it. Alan, based on your experience, have you seen behaviors such as teasing or, good-natured ribbing that can escalate into bullying? And I think sometimes that behavior really starts when there is that power imbalance. How can someone diffuse when this is starting, when this is happening?
It's a great question, Christine, and the problem with the question is really in who the person is that's being ribbed or teased, picked on. There are children who have a natural ability, or even adults, to negotiate. Obviously, we see where they go in jobs in life, or they just have natural abilities. I was talking to my mother, and we were talking about like how different people think, and the comment was, when someone doesn't like her, she says, well, what's wrong with them? Well, when someone doesn't like me, I say, well, what's wrong with me? And so you really deal with the kids who are going to get bullied are going to be the ones that have this self-esteem issue or self-method that they look to the outward for the acceptance of the inward, and meaning that if someone doesn't like them, and they want them to like them, they wonder what's wrong with them. So the problem becomes one of who is being bullied, and what do they come to the table with? What kind of person are they? For me, I'm a sensitive person. I'm very in touch with emotions. I cry and laugh, and I'm a highly sensitive person. I tend to be able to read other people very quickly and note when they're sad if they're not even saying it. It's just, I'm sensitive. I'm emotional. And for a lot of guys out there, they're not allowed to be. A lot of women will say they're emotional, and I think that's why statistically we see more women in therapeutic or psychological care than men, because for many men, we're not allowed to be emotional or sensitive. But for others, there are other characteristics. It may be that they have a learning disability. So, they can't necessarily diffuse a situation because they don't have the capability. Take someone with minor autism who really doesn't understand sort of how people are emotionally treating them. So I know a lot of people with Asperger's syndrome, and both on their end and on the end of the people that are picking on them, they can't read what's going on. And so all they know is it's painful. But they don't know how to negotiate out of that, and they can't be expected to. If somebody's a minority race, they can't get out of what they look like. I'm Jewish, so there were many years I pretended not to be Jewish, and I could get away with that. I don't have, the horns coming out of my head like some people would say, or other crazy things. I could just pretend not to be Jewish and be left alone, and it's sad, but that's the case for someone like me. But for someone who's a minority race, that it's obvious they're not going to be able to get away from that situation. And the problem is that to diffuse it, when we talk about diffusing a situation, it means that either the person being bullied must find a way to negotiate out of it, or a bystander might help, which, we've learned more about bystander awareness, and there's been great television shows about how effective it can be. But finding someone to be a bystander, how often, it's like being in a car accident. Do people stop and help you? Often not. It's hard to find that one person who has that heart that will be the bystander, because they're taking a great risk at doing that as well in a lot of situations. And overall, the people who relentlessly are bullied are ones who react. So, like, for me, I was sensitive. So if a bully's picking on me, I'm going to cry. I'm going to do exactly what they want me to. I'm going to cower in a corner and hide. And that's giving the bully what they want. That's what they're looking for to make themselves feel better. So I think it really depends on the type of person. And while we can, as adults, rationalize that we can come to situations differently, I think as a child that's a lot to ask, that they be someone they're not. And nobody should have to be someone they're not.
Yes, I remember as a teacher when I observed how children interacted with each other when an adult wasn't particularly involved. Even the way friendships were formed, they were not always healthy. Two children could be friends, and I would be curious, well, wait, your friend isn't really treating you that well. So when you talk about the skills that a child has, and I think sometimes it goes into adulthood, if both people don't realize, is this a healthy, supportive relationship, you need to know what that is to be able to say, yes, I accept this, or no, I don't. And it's very definitely true. Once someone sees the reaction that you have being a sensitive person, once they see that they can get that reaction, they come back to you to get more reaction.
Right. And then the rumor spreads that I am this way, and then anyone else that wants to bully me would start to. It becomes a cycle. As a child, you can't really get an understanding of how to get out of that cycle. It's just not. It's not something. Again, that's why I would love to have programs in the schools where they help teach you how to break the cycle or be something. But at the same time, I don't want to be who I'm not. I think it would be a shame if I wasn't a sensitive person, because if I wasn't, guess what? We wouldn't be talking, because I would have never started this movement that I'm on and never tried to change the world in terms of bullying behaviors and getting it truly worked on in a psychological way. I would have just, gone on with my life. And so we need sensitive people. We need people who care. That's not a bad trait, but at the same time, it has a yin. I always say there's a yang to every yin.
Sensitivity exists in society, but it's not always the exalted position or the exalted way of being. So we sweep this under the rug. Some in society don't necessarily value this and know that it adds richness. And as you said, especially gender-related, that this is acceptable behavior for a girl, but not for a little boy. That thing of, don't cry, be strong. And boys are allowed to have their feelings. Men are allowed to have their feelings and express it. And though we sometimes give lip service to it, when it happens, we're not supportive of a man who wants to express his emotions.
And what we're in a situation right now that saddens me is that I did drama, so I can say things about homosexuality or homosexual men. Not that they're all more sensitive, but a lot of what has happened to me over time as an adult is people ask me if I'm gay because I'm sensitive. And they equate a sensitive man with homosexuality, which is really sad because we should be allowed to be sensitive. I don't like sports. That's not my thing. I like having conversations with people about how we feel. And I shouldn't be labeled because of that. And I think a lot of men fear that labeling, like, hey, I have to be all macho and culturally this is the way I have to behave. And I think that's very damaging. And again, I've been asked so many times, are you sure you're not gay? And it's like, no, I'm a sensitive male.
You mentioned in your conversation the bias in certain professions toward women, and I remember one of the trainings I did with Elaine Aaron, who does work with the highly sensitive person, and I was surprised at the number of men in the workshop. That was one of the few workshops that it wasn't predominantly 90% women. I think it was, a 50-50 split, or maybe 60% men, that in this workshop, the men who've heard of Dr. Aaron, they gravitated toward it, and this was the first time I was in a workshop with so many men who wanted a place to express their high sensitivity.
Oh, yeah, and I go to yoga once a week, and there are men in there, and I can look at them and I go, they're the sensitive ones, they're the ones that believe they need to find peace in life, and this kind of living is a way to express their sensitivity. But, I can guarantee a lot of them do what I do, and they go, back to work and they play the macho role because that's what's expected. And if they were to be sensitive, then people would judge them.
It would be a chance for bullying.
Right. And so, again, I refuse to take away my sensitivity. And I've been bullied as an adult even, but it no longer affects me the same way. But it is a problem that we don't allow in society. Being sensitive isn't seen as a great trait always, and in a lot of situations. And certainly as a child, it becomes a problem in the bullying world.
Alan, I want to jump in here. I've been listening with great interest, and I want to say first off that you're very brave to have mentioned that you're not into sports, given how extroverted society is, and that's a key point that I want to bring up here in this situation, that many of the things that you talked about in terms of C-PTSD and what the official definition of bullying is, that it's a form of aggression, right? And so one of the things that I disagree with is that I don't think it has to be repeated. You could be bullied one time, and that would be enough to take you out. It doesn't have to be repeated. You're sitting on the bar stool and just watching the game, and the guy comes up to you and he says, "Hey, I don't like your face," and then he hits you in the face. So what's that? So you didn't do anything. And so I think that that's part of the discussion that needs to take place. There's something wrong with the act of bullying. In fact, one of the things that Christine and I talk about, we go up to a place called East Lyme in Connecticut, and Yale University has a lovely facility there as a lake. And so one of the things we like to do is go out early in the morning, say it's 5:30 in the morning, and the sun is not up yet. It's just getting ready to rise, and there's a fog on the lake like the clouds. And so we were standing there looking out at this beautiful lake, and there was an egret or some type of white bird. He was just sitting on the dock, minding his business, and this huge other bird came and chased him away. And we were looking at each other, because that's actually bullying, because, you're watching this in nature. Here is this pristine environment with 4,000 acres. There's nothing around. The bird wasn't bothering anyone, and the other bird just came and forced the other bird to leave and chased him pretty far.
Yeah.
So,
it was
pretty clear.
You should see my two cats.
Okay, and so this is part of what we're talking about. One of the other things was two other things I wanted to comment on. So it's really clear that we're going to have to do a series, Alan, that there are so many things that you have brought up, the issue of what does it mean to be a highly sensitive male or female? And I think part of the things that I see, that the term highly sensitive person, that's actually, in my opinion, a misnomer, because a better definition or better clarity of that term or what that is would be that the person has a high sensory awareness. They have a high sensitivity to sensory awareness, so they are receiving more input, okay? And so I just saw an article where it said the order of magnitude might be for a person that's more sensitive, like to hearing sounds or seeing visual stimuli, might be 5 to 10 times. So, for example, myself, I often hear things that other people might not be aware of, or I smell things, or, I know people who have synesthesia, and they had said, well, they are experiencing things that other people are not experiencing, and so the research shows that this is a real thing. And so we'll have to do some kind of series, because you have brought up so many things in connection to this bullying, and I want to zero in on something that you said, which is very personal to me. This issue of exclusion or exclusivity, or when you said that, I wrote down shunning, because in my own life, I have experienced that to a high level. I haven't experienced the physical bullying or even the emotional bullying, but I have experienced in many, many cases being shunned. And so, I had said to Christine on many occasions, I said, I feel like Worf in the Klingon thing when he is shunned, and they said, you're no longer a Klingon. So I've had that experience. So, Alan, I want to just jump to the meat of this is, based on your lived experience and research, can you tell our audience what are the underlying causes of bullying, and why do you think bullies seek to wreak such havoc and fear and terror in their victims?
Well, I think there's a few reasons why bullies behave the way they do. I still believe there's something underlying in their own lives, usually either abuse or loneliness, that they have their own self-esteem issues. I can't remember the studies, but the studies show that the bully and the bullying victim have just about the same level of doubt of self-esteem. So it's very interesting that that's the case. But I think people can use bullying, the bullies can do it because they can direct their frustrations, hurt, and anger and difficulty at home, or maybe even in class or at work, by bullying you. They see you as the weaker individual, so they choose to direct their frustrations, which I found to be called displaced aggression, right? So I actually have displaced aggression with my family, because of what happened to me. I take it out on ones I love, because I know I don't have to worry about them not loving me because they're my family. So that's a big trait that goes on. Lack of attention is the other one. So either they're frustrated or they don't get attention. So they're not getting attention from friends, parents, teachers. They want to feel important. They want to feel popular. They want to be seen as, let's say, tough or cool or in charge. That's a feeling they have, and they're not getting that attention naturally. So they gravitate towards bullying as a way to get that. Some kids have learned bullying behaviors from others, parents, brothers, sisters, friends. I think there's a lot of that. I think, it's passed down. If your dad is abusive or your mom is abusive, you go and you be abusive to someone else because you see that as power. You see that as the way to get what you want, and that's their way of getting what they want. They believe that putting fear in the victim will have their best shot at getting everything else because that's what they've seen. I think some people also do it because they're the victims themselves. As I said, I think that's a big a big reason why. I think that's why I always say, we can't just focus on recovery from a bullying victim, but also for the bully, because something's going on there. Bad upbringing. It's amazing how many stories there are where they pull someone in to tell the parents that the kid is bullying someone, and the parents then bully the administration at the school. They go, "What? Not my kid," and I'm going to sue you, and they do all these adult bullying behaviors because they're bullies. I mean, they're teaching exactly the kids the thing that they do, and they have no sensitivity. They're insensitive to other people's feelings and emotions. So I talk a lot about, we should really, along with math and reading and writing, be teaching things about empathy and sympathy, but we don't. We don't teach any of the esoteric ideas that are emotions. So they don't know how to deal with them themselves because they've never been taught, and they're being brought up badly. So they actually get enjoyment out of seeing, a classmate or a bully victim depressed, sad, and hurt. So like me, when I'm crying, getting picked on, that's making them happy. That's feeding their self-esteem. So just like I needed my self-esteem fixed, they're using it as a way to fix their self-esteem. And then, we could talk about today's society of violence being prevalent in this country, and the idea that bullies win is shown in many cases. There's a lot of TV and viewing now that's good, what I call good bad guys. It's like, Sons of Anarchy, although I watched it and enjoyed it, is really they're a bunch of bad guys, but they're better than the other bad guys. So the other bad guys are neo-Nazis. Well, this is just a motorcycle club who's, running a gun trade. So it's like we've inundated people with things that, hey, let's root for the bad guy, and I think that has a danger as well, and that comes out that way as well. So I think there's lots of reasons why people bully. It really is about power, self-worth, their own self-esteem, and some sort of happiness that they receive by doing it. And it's sad to say that, but I think that's really at the root cause.
Okay, so Alan, I just, again, through all of your answers, I'm thinking of articles, books, a TV, radio show. One of the things that you just mentioned, this issue of people getting pleasure out of the pain of others. So, there's I can't think of there's a German word, I think it's Freudenfrage or something like that. I will look it up and send you the link, and we will post it. The thing is, there was a Boston Legal episode where it talked about this thing of the person doing the hurting, that they derived pleasure out of seeing the person twist in the wind, etc. And so I've been looking at the neuroscience and the psychology behind this, and they've done studies where they actually you can see on a fMRI the areas of the brain that light up when a person would cause another person pain, for example, giving them electric shock or something like that. And so you really touch on something where this speaks to the issue of whether or not the person's a sociopath or a psychopath, and what those things mean, because part of the definitions is where those people don't seem to have the capacity to experience empathy and compassion, which are two terms you just brought up, right? And so,
right.
And then when you add to that not only do they not feel those things, but they get pleasure, that's a very dangerous combination. And so,
well, it's highly dangerous. In fact, I'm listening to an excellent book called Columbine by David Cullum, which is obviously about what happened in Columbine. And Eric Harris, more so than Dylan Klebold, who was one of the shooters, had this incredibly megalomaniacal, I want to be the only living person on the earth writings nonstop. This idea of only being satiated by everyone else being dead. And
that's pretty
sick. Amazing and scary that people are out there like that.
Yeah. So, Alan, can you tell our audience what percentage of the population has been bullied? I think you mentioned the figure of 80%. And then have you seen research that tells whether or not what the percentages might be in the different age groups, children versus teens versus adults, and then also whether or not people actually grow out of that behavior, or does the reverse, which is, could the bullying behavior get worse as they become adults?
Well, I personally think, and again, it's statistically true, and I'll share that in a minute, that people don't grow out of being bullies unless they're taught to grow out of doing that. They have to have that feeling. It's like we know, if you study serial killers, they're some of the most charming people on the face of the earth, right? That's one of their traits. They're also some of the smartest people. And that's a problem. So, if you don't have the empathy or sympathy factor and you're that can create a bad situation. But I did look up some statistical research done in 2013 by the American Society for the Positive Care of Children. And it was really about 28% of students at any given time between 12 and 18 are reported being consistently bullied. So, again, that's a variance. So, when we talk about the 80% will claim that they've had a bullying experience, but at any time, 28% of students are being bullied. And it's an astronomical account, I don't have it off the top of my head, of children that don't go to school because they're being bullied. And so they actually stop going to school, and that's why homeschooling has become more popular over the more recent years. According to the Department of Housing and Homeland Human Services, about 1 in 3 U.S. students say they are being bullied currently. So that's, again, astronomical statistics, and these are coming from studies. They're sobering. 70.6% of students have witnessed bullying. So it's happening everywhere, and it would be nice to believe that we grow out of it, but more recently I've been focusing attention on workplace bullying because more of my readership from my blog have been talking about workplace bullying. So I looked up on workplacebullying.org's website, and 27% of workers today experience workplace bullying. So again, if 28% at any given time of students 12 to 18 are reportedly being bullied, and 27% of workers, I'm just going to conclude that, guess what, people aren't growing out of it. If the statistics are that closely aligned, that would be an assumption I would probably say. And with that number, it just shows that no one does really grow out of that it's never about kids being kids, and that concept has now been debunked. And now that workplace bullying is getting attention, I think we're going to see that people who are living in a taught behavior, just like the survivors have problems, the people who are bullies continue to have problems and are continuing with that behavior. Is never broken from it.
Great. Alan, as we wind down here, I just want to focus for our audience. I think anyone listening who would be fascinated by this topic would be interested in practical tips a bullied person can implement. So I'd like you to briefly give our audience some tips that they could use if they're in a situation where it's either them or their child or someone they know. So, for example, this would be familiar to most people. There have been all these movies recently about mean girls in schools. Mm-hmm. And so what would a 12-year-old girl or 14-year-old girl in school she goes to school and her lunch is being snatched by the group of girls, or the kid is being told, he goes, I'll be waiting for you outside after school to beat you up. And so I think that would be like a little comment of either if a person hasn't experienced that, a high percentage of children have witnessed that or have heard that phrase where, oh, yeah, when I was a kid, they called it taking tickets for the fight after school, Oh, did you hear that, Felix is going to be waiting for Alex outside, and then there would be this huge crowd. And this just triggered a memory of being in junior high school where there are these people who are instigators, and in one particular case, these two kids, didn't really want to fight. The other people, they wanted to see a fight after school. And so the two guys are standing there. I remember this so well. And then the two guys are circling each other, and they don't really want to mix it up. And so the crowd pushed them together, and then they started fighting. So, this topic of bullying you bringing up is I'm sure it's triggering memories in people.
Well, and both of your stories are ones that I tell in my set of stories, and that will be in my book and that are on my blog site. One where I was the victim, and another where when we moved in junior high school, the rumor circulated that these two boys were going to have a fight, and I've never seen such a crowd, and I felt awful, but I went, and I witnessed it, and I always say it's difficult for me because I wasn't willing to do anything. I was just happy it wasn't me, is what I write. It's just, for one of the few times it wasn't me getting beat up and picked on. And when I left, I didn't feel satiated or happy. I was very sad that it happened. But what you're asking, Bob, is a really hard question, because I think, as I've said, some kids, some people are just natural negotiators, and some are not. Some of us are easily sensitive. According to kidpower.org, though, there are ways that you can try to overcome a bully, is with attitude. Act with awareness, calm, respect, and confidence. Don't give the bully what they want. And again, that's easier said than done, but if a parent works with their child a little bit, or the child works with a therapist or a professional and goes through situations on how to diffuse that situation, they might be able to. Also, to try to give children or even adults powerful, positive ways to leave a situation. So you don't have to stop. You don't have to be stuck. You can veer around bullying if you learn skills. You can use target denial, which is just pretend like it's not happening, because they're looking for an effect. So if they don't get it, they're going to give up on you. Set boundaries yourself about disrespecting others or unsafe behavior that you get involved in. I mean, if you're involved in being disrespectful to others, I think you can pretty much expect that they're going to do the same to you. Also, use your voice. Don't be afraid to be loud and yell no. Make sure that others hear. A lot of the complaints are that adults just don't know. Well, be loud. It's like I was saying about rape or something like that. Yeah, you got to yell. Someone's mugging you. You got to make sound. If anyone is around, you're more likely to get support by being really loud about it and doing something better than nothing. And try to learn to protect your feelings. Again, I can't say any of this is easy. I can't say that it's real, but work on the fact that this is going to happen, and learn that if you're a sensitive person, and someone's calling you names, learn to accept that it happens and don't react. Find ways not to react to these situations, because that's what the bully's always looking for, is that reaction. And again, how do you say that about people with minor autism, with Asperger's syndrome or other things, where they can't react, they can't know from emotional change, and it's not in their abilities to do that. So it's a sad thing, but we try. Practice positive inclusion instead of negative inclusion. Don't just not play because everyone's already playing. Ask to play, and help find ways to learn how to answer to rebuttal. So if they say, no, we don't want you to play, say, have answers that you might be able to give then. Again, a technique might work, might not, but at the same time, you may not want to play with those kids. Kind of what you were saying is we don't always want to be around the bullies. And get help from busy adults. The problem with adults is we tend to be busy. If you personally, if you know anything about the school system, teachers are never not teaching. They go home and they're grading. They're, constantly doing the work that they do for a living. And so you're going to have to seek that help from a busy adult, unfortunately, because the adult, it's very hard for them to know. So teaching children to advocate for themselves, that's something I did with my children, was you have to advocate for yourself. I'm not going to come defend you or do what's called helicopter parenting and go constantly over there and defend you. You have to defend yourself. through advocacy. And finally, as a last resort, although I hate to even say it, physical self-defense. It's important to remember that what we're talking about is defense and not necessarily teaching someone to fight. There's a lot of good dojo martial arts programs, and they talk about bullying and the confidence. The ones that scare me are the ones that say, hey, you can defend yourself at any time. When someone approaches you, give them a roundhouse kick, that I'm going to teach you. I talk to a lot of martial arts folks about bullying, and what we want to teach is really better self-esteem, that they feel that they have the ability to defend themselves, but not to use it as an offensive method to quell it. But that's I really think important. And I've talked to a juvenile judge before, and she'll be the first to tell people, hey, if you're going to get in a fight, that's what we like to call assault as adults. And usually both sides can get in trouble for assault. So fighting isn't the answer. It's the last resort. And again, it has to be done in a defensive manner and not offensive. So that's about it. Past that, it's hard to say that there's any great solution.
Great, Alan. I want to thank you for that, and I'm sure our audience appreciates your explanation. I want to thank you for being our featured guest today.
Thank you. We really enjoyed having you on the show and learning about the work that you're doing. And I'm sure many of our listeners would like to learn more about what you're doing on your site, the book that will be coming out, and how they might contact you or work with you, share their stories with you, because you really offer a platform where storytelling can be used for healing. So if you could let our listeners know how they can get in touch with you and what you're doing.
Sure. Well, with my new organization, Bullying Recovery, you can go to my website at www.bullyingrecovery.org, and you can contact me through that. There's a contact form there and more information. You can also read my blog that I started 8 years ago. I link through it. You can also email me. I'm more than happy to get emails and talk to people. To email me, it's Alan Eisenberg, AlanEisenberg, @bullyingrecovery.org. And you can also go to my website at bullyinglte.wordpress.com to see where I start from. And I'm also currently trying to fundraise for my company, and I see the world as angel investors. It's kind of like Shark Tank. I don't want to go in front of Shark Tank. I want to support with everybody. I think we all have offers to support things. So if you're interested in supporting me, you can go to my GoFundMe site at www.gofundme.com/bullyrecovery. And, that's where I'm working toward getting the funding to get the book out in as wide a method as possible. I particularly want to get it in the school libraries and maybe even make it required reading, I would hope, at some point, where people can understand all the things we've talked about here.
Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Alan. So, audience, if you want to contact Alan or see his work, see those who are connected to him, go to bullyingrecovery.org. That's BULLYINGRECOVERY, bullyingrecovery.org. You can use Alan's contact form, or you can email him directly at alaneisenberg@bullyingrecovery.org. You can also support his work at GoFundMe. So there are just many ways to engage with Alan should you want to support this wonderful work if you yourself have been on either side of the bullying equation. Thank you, Alan.
Oh, well, thank you very much for having me. It was a real pleasure getting a chance to talk to you.
Yes, and Alan, I just want to say again on the record that you are doing a wonderful public good and a public service in the upliftment of human spirit. This is something that's really needed, and if at any point as you go forward writing your book, if you would like me to write a blurb or anything like that, I would be happy to do that for you. So I want to ask you this in concluding, what final thoughts or key idea would you like to have our audience take away from today's broadcast, Alan?
Well, first let me say thank you, Bob, for those kind comments, and certainly I will take advantage having you write me a blurb as the book comes out. So I really appreciate that. And I only hope that I'm doing the good that I want to do. This is my dream, and it's to help people. It's to help others overcome these issues. The main thought I would want both children and adults to know is that in the 8 years that I've been dealing with bullying recovery, I can tell you that you're not alone, and that there is a large population of people who deal with stress and anxiety and depression due to bullying. It's a big community of support, and you can find that community online. You can find it at my website. You can find it on Twitter. You can find it in so many places. I have met so many great people who also do the wonderful work that I'm doing. That all you have to do is ask, and there's so many of us that will reach out and help you and help find you help if that's what's needed. We're not all professionals. Some of us who do it are, but can help you find professionals that know exactly how to do this. So please, if you're listening and you need help, know it's there. And again, if you visit my sites, I usually have helplines from other groups to help you find what you need as help to recover from bullying or long-term damage that you might be dealing with from CPTSD.
Well, Alan, thank you so much for being our featured guest today, and you are bringing a wonderful level of resources to the world. I want to thank our audience for listening. No matter where you're listening, in whatever time zone you're listening, you can start to feel better right away. We welcome and look forward to receiving your comments about the show. So please let us know if there are topics you'd like to see us cover or a guest we've had in the past that you'd like us to invite back. Please contact us through our website with your feedback and suggestions. Remember, listeners, if you'd like to experience the same benefits our coaching clients get with us and learn how you can get control of your schedule, including easy ways to dissolve your chronic pain, stress, and anxiety, then give us a call at 954-900-2179. That's 954-900-2179. Mention that you heard our Stress Free Now podcast show, and your first session is absolutely free. Call today to schedule your appointment. For Christine Wright, this is Dr. Robert Wright of www.stressfreenow.info. Until next time, be safe and be well.